Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Explaining Minecraft. We haven't had one of these for a while, but anyway, today we are going to be doing something I think could be pretty interesting, or at least useful. So we're going to be explaining ticks in Minecraft. So that means game ticks, redstone ticks, all that stuff. I'm going to be explaining that to you. And without any further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so here we are in a online whiteboard. This particular website is called Ziteboard, and you can like write on it and stuff, and it's pretty cool. But anyway, all this looks complicated, so let's start from the beginning over here. Seconds, redstone ticks, and game ticks. So I'm just gonna color code them. So anything about seconds is gonna be in blue, anything about redstone ticks is going to be in red, and anything about game ticks or anything else is going to be in black. So let's start with seeing how the game distributes ticks. So in a normal situation when the game is not lagging, there will be 20 game ticks in 1 second. So you can count all these, but there should be 20 game ticks in the duration of 1 second. Now you might be wondering, what happens inside the game tick? Well, this is a game tick expanded, and it's basically split up into two parts. The first, part, the code does stuff because obviously computers are not instant. They can't do stuff instantly, so it takes time for them to actually execute code. And so the code does stuff. It checks for everything, and then it does stuff based on what it sees. And then it calculates how long it took to do all this, and for the rest of the time of one tick, it just rests. So here after the right, we have some math over here going on. Don't be overwhelmed, this is pretty simple. So here we start off with a very simple equation. 20 game ticks equals 1 second. So we just got that from the fact that there's 20 game ticks inside 1 second, so that should be pretty obvious. Next, what we do is we divide both sides by 20. So you can do that in an equation. In case you don't know, you can just do something as long as you do it to both sides. That way everything stays equal. So as you can see, we divided it by 20. We have 1 game tick on this side and 1/20th of a second on this side. And you can see over here, we're multiplying this 1/20th of a second by 50 over 50. So this is already in the next step, but we multiply it by 50 over 50, and anything divided by itself is 1, so we can safely do that. But we're not going to cancel this out. Instead, we're going to multiply this 50 by this 1 over here, and this 50 by this 20, which is how you multiply fractions. Next, over here, we have 1 game tick equals 50 over 1000 seconds. That's what happened when we multiplied this 50 by this 1 and this 50 by this 20. We got 50 over 1000. And finally, we got 1 game tick equals 50 milliseconds. The prefix milli means 1/1000th, so there's 50 thousandths of a second. So these are essentially the same number. It's just this is a different unit. This is 1,000th of a second, and this is 1 second. So of course this means that in a normal game tick when there is no lag, it should take no more than 50 milliseconds. Now you might be wondering, what exactly does MSPT mean? Because sometimes you hear people talk about MSPT. MSPT stands for milliseconds per tick. So yeah, milliseconds per tick. Let's break this down a bit. How we break this down is we just change this per into a divided sign, and we get milliseconds divided by ticks. What this essentially means is how many milliseconds it takes to execute one tick. So if we go back here to our diagram of 1 game tick, you can see that the code is doing stuff for just a little bit of time, and then for the rest of the time of 50 milliseconds, it is resting. I should mention that this interval is 50 milliseconds. So MSPT essentially means how many milliseconds it takes for the code to do stuff. So if it takes only, say, 10 milliseconds per tick, then we only take 10 milliseconds to execute all this code, and for the rest, which is 40 milliseconds, we're just resting. So that means that we're not lagging because we still haven't gone over that 50 milliseconds per tick barrier, which I'll talk about later. Well, why not talk about it now? So here we have a diagram of a healthy tick. I'm going to call this a healthy tick. So the code doing stuff, that time takes less than or equal to 50 milliseconds. So as long as all this shaded in stuff, which is when the code does stuff, when the code is being executed, as long as that stays below the 50 millisecond kind of cage that this tick stays in, then it's fine, there's no lag. If your computer is not that good, however, or if you're giving the Minecraft code too much stuff to do, for example by placing a boatload of chickens into somebody's base, then the code takes longer than usual to execute. So that's when lag happens. So that's when it takes longer than 50 milliseconds for the code to do stuff. So this means that the game is lagging because we have breached the sort of 50 millisecond barrier. So that means that we cannot execute the code in a normal time of 1 tick. And this means that our second cannot hold 20 game ticks anymore. We are gonna start to drop in TPS. What is TPS? Well, let's break that down as well, like we did over here. So this means ticks per second. And again, as we did over here, we're gonna change this per into a divide. So let's write that over here off to the side real quick. So here we have our expression of ticks per second. So what this essentially means is the amount of ticks that we can do in 1 second. So of course, normally with no lag, we will achieve a steady 20 TPS. No matter how little it takes for the code to actually do stuff, there is always going to be that rest, which means that the game tick is stretched out to 50 milliseconds, so we always have 20 milliseconds per tick. Now what happens if our game is lagging? Well then, we can't do 20 game ticks per second anymore, because the ticks take too long, so yeah, they just don't all fit in there anymore. By the way, I just want you to excuse the fact that these are all different sizes. I don't know how to make them all the same size, so you can say that's one downside of using this whiteboard. But other than that, I think this is a pretty good whiteboard. But let's get back on topic now. Now, one last thing I want to address. Some of you might be wondering, what does tick warp mean? Because in carpet mod, you can do several things with the ticks, but tick warp is probably the most interesting. Everything else is kind of self-explanatory. Tick warp, however, can take a little bit more to explain. So remember this model of a game tick? We have the code doing stuff, and then for the rest, we have a rest, because we have to keep this at 50 milliseconds to keep our game running at exactly 20 TPS. Now you might be wondering, what happens if we just remove this rest? Now that's exactly what tick warp does. It just removes the rests, and we just have the code doing stuff. So of course that means that if it takes less than 50 milliseconds to execute a tick, then we just have a little bit of the tick left. But what exactly does that mean for the game? Now here we have another diagram of 1 second, similar to what we have up here. Now there's one main difference. If you were to count every single one of these boxes, which represent 1 tick, there would be more than 20. This is because of, in our example, we removed the rests, so it takes less time for a tick to execute, which means that we can fit more ticks inside 1 second. Think of it this way. If you were trying to fit 50 dominoes or something inside of a wooden box, then let's say you could fit all of them in there, but you cannot fit one more because they're all tightly packed in there. Now imagine if you just took those dominoes, each one of them, and just cut them in half and threw away one of those halves. Now there would be way more space left inside the box, so you can fit more dominoes inside of your box. It's the same sort of thing going on here. Our ticks do not take as much time to execute, which means we can fit more of them inside 1 second. Now, what this means is that 1 second does not necessarily take 20 game ticks. Something this does not help against is lag. If the code doing stuff already takes more than 50 milliseconds, tick warp will not make it take less than 50 milliseconds. Because the game, it's already not resting at all, so there's nothing for tick warp to remove. Now if it's not lagging, you just remove this little portion here of the part that it's resting, and then you will have shorter ticks. Now this means that the TPS depends on both your hardware and on how long it takes for the tick to do itself just in general because of other stuff that might be happening inside your game. So that's an explanation of tick warp. Tick warp essentially just removes the rest. So that's pretty much it in terms of what ticks are. Now, you might notice I have not covered redstone ticks yet. Let's talk about redstone. So here we have the same 1 second diagram. We have 1 second equals 20 game ticks, and we have all our 20 game ticks listed out here. One redstone tick is not, I repeat, it is not a simple block. One redstone tick is simply a unit of time. One redstone tick is just equal to 1/10 of a second. The reason that redstone ticks are just a unit of time is that they don't necessarily follow this sort of pattern. They can also be like this, at a sort of 1 game tick offset. Now the thing is that with vanilla Minecraft redstone mechanics, you cannot get 1 game tick delays. However, you can get odd game tick delays. This just has a 1 game tick offset from the normal sort of rhythm going on here. But it is still possible, however, to get this in vanilla Minecraft. So here we are in a Minecraft world. This is my redstone testing world. All these things are kind of trash, and there are some chunk errors. However, this is the contraption I want to focus on. Now, if we click this button, you can't really see anything at normal speed, but if we set the tick rate to, say, 5, then when we click this button, everything happens much slower. You can see that these repeaters, they are actually kind of one turns on and the other turns on, and the one from the next line turns on and this line, and so on. And the reason is that this sort of contraption here, it was shown by Almango first, I think. This actually creates an odd game tick delay. So this observer gives 2 game ticks, then this scaffolding reacting to this trapdoor being removed under from it, this takes 1 game tick, and then this observer takes 2 more game ticks. So we have a total of 5 game ticks of delay in this thing. That's opposed to just 2 game ticks from here, which is what you normally get with stuff like repeaters and observers. Let's watch that again, but at an even slower rate, just tick rate of 2. Let's press this button. And as you can see, all these repeaters are set to just 1 redstone tick of delay, but they're still kind of out of sync. The reason is that this side was an odd delay, and this side was on an even delay. I think that's enough Minecraft for now. Let's head back into our whiteboard. So now you know why redstone tick isn't a sort of steady thing. It's just a unit of time that we use to measure stuff like repeaters and comparators and other redstone components. By the way, in one of Mumbo Jumbo's videos, quite a bit of time ago, something like 60 facts about redstone, he said that when comparators were first introduced, they had a slightly shorter delay than repeaters. This might be because when they first introduced them, they made them to be 1 game tick delay. He didn't expressly say that, but that is what I'm suspecting was the case. So that is pretty much it for today. I am very grateful for you watching this video, and as you can see, we covered quite a lot, so I hope you walk away with some more knowledge about redstone and game ticks and stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.